Hello my friends, welcome back to the channel, or if it's your first time here, then welcome. Make yourself at home, hit that subscribe button and enable those notifications if Planet Zoo content is your thing. So, for this video, I'm going to explain to you all a theory that I developed the other day. It's worth pointing out that I was incredibly sleep deprived when I had the idea for this video. There is the possibility that it could end up being babble. But it does make sense to me, and hopefully by explaining to you and showing you how that works, it will make sense to you by the end too. And the topic of this theory is, of course, how aviaries could work in Planet Zoo. So flying birds in Planet Zoo is something a lot of players want. I count myself among the players that want birds. Admittedly, it isn't my number one thing right now. I would love more South American animals, especially tamarins and marmosets. I do think those are missing from the game. But it is on my list, and I do believe that flying birds may be closer to coming to the game than we realise. With the recent Eurasia Animal Pack and Update 1.16, we got two key clues that flying birds are very much on the table. The first has been talked about by plenty of other YouTubers and Planet Zoo players, and that of course is the inclusion of the mute swan. The mute swan is significant for two reasons. First of all, it's our first official waterfowl in the game. And number two, the mute swan is the first bird in Planet Zoo to utilise a new feather technology. This technology was actually spoken about by a member of the Planet Zoo development team in the most recent developer diary for the Eurasia Animal Pack. So, Frontier wouldn't just spend time and money creating a new technology just to waste it on one animal. So I suspect we'll definitely be getting more birds in the future. Probably some more waterfowl to start with, to be honest, but however long it may be, both the future of Planet Zoo and the wait, I definitely think flying birds could be on the table. Something I haven't seen anybody talk about though is how souvenir shops work in terms of guest AI and pathfinding. And this is where I've come in my tinfoil hat and said, hey, this would actually work well for flying birds. So to understand what I mean by this, we need to take a look at the souvenir shop, including how to set one up and how guests interact with it. So to set up a gift shop, you need a minimum of 3x2 tiles, and this is one of the blueprints that comes sort of ready-made in the game, and this is the smallest size it can be. It is 3 tiles across and 2 tiles back. This is on a 4x4 grid, of course, and this is all set up with animal hats and plushies and mugs and animal statues and t-shirts and so on. Now, when I hit play, you will see that the guests just sort of amble round and they stop and look at things and nod. And the guest, not the guest, what's the word I'm looking for? The vendor just sort of stands there and waves at people. This happens quite a bit. They sort of get stuck a little bit and do a really slow walk. That's partly because you need to leave enough room between things for guests to navigate, and also partly because the guest pathfinding AI isn't perfect. But we will get back onto that in just a while. But there are two parts to this that are uneditable. The first is your entrance. This mat cannot be moved. It sits in the centre of your 3x2. That mat cannot be moved. And the other thing that cannot be edited is the floor colour. You can put your own floor down over the top of this and it'll still work. But it'd be nice to sort of have a customisable floor. I think that would make life a little bit easier for all of us. But what is important to note is even though sometimes the guests struggle, they never clip out of this 3x2 boundary. Like, you'll never see a guest sort of swivel round and look on these on the outside or clip through the back wall. They are contained within this 3x2 boundary, even though inside they are free to move wherever they please. They can go to the balloons in the corner, they can go to the t-shirts at the back, they can go to the vendor over on the right hand side there. However, You can make it bigger, and that's something that I've done just across the road. As far as I can tell, you can make a gift shop as big as you want. And you see here, walking round, there isn't much issue with the guest pathfinding, except for maybe here. These are probably a little bit too close together, and these two are having some issues sort of bouncing off each other. Other than that, the only other issue is down here, but that's to do with the entrance, that everyone sort of bottlenecks into this. This is the entrance and exit. Unfortunately, you can't make it bigger, otherwise I would. And you can add another one as well. You'd have to add another shop, which is unfortunate. But as long as the tiles are all connected, you can make it as big as you want. So this, for example, doesn't work. It's not part of this. Whereas if I then go into here and we just select the entirety of this floor. Have I got any at the other side? Nope, that's absolutely fine. Oh, there we go. So you can put your own floor down over the top, like so. And if I split this from the grid, I could lower it down further and make it blend in more and stuff like that. But for the purposes of demonstrating, I think it does fine. You know, you can leave gaps. That's fine. But again, they are, apart from this person here who's just completely ruined my theory, they are contained within this footprint. There's only that one what's sort of clipped out, and I suspect it's because they see this as a walkable area, whereas if I moved these counters back a bit, I don't think the guests would be able to get behind there. And that's what got me thinking that this would function better for an aviary than the walkthrough exhibits do. The walkthrough exhibits, they're good, don't get me wrong, and hey, there's me with my axolotl hat. Hi, me. So this blueprint is actually off the Steam Workshop. It's based on the Chester Zoo fruit bat forest. I didn't make it. I can't remember the name of the person that made it. I'm sorry, but it's a great build. I really like it. I saw it and I was like, immediately, it reminded me of Chester Zoo. I'll put the link in the description. So we've got the two bat species in here, and you know, it works fine for the bats and the butterflies and the sloth. But I think for birds, we all want something a little bit more customizable, and I think the souvenir shop sort of method is better. Because although it's still sort of contained and we can't make like massive sprawling circular aviaries, it's still better than nothing. You know, the birds would still be able to go wherever they want in here. But I realise that that's not an awful lot to go on. So, the gift shop currently has 11 placeable items. 10 of those have full customization, which are like the shelves and the balloon. So they have full flexicolour customization, and they also have item customization as well. And then the counters just have flexicolour customization. They don't have like, you can't change what's on the counter, stuff like that. But guests can only interact with certain items. So like for this, it's not connected to a souvenir shop, so we can't have that option. But if we quickly speed back over to the souvenir shop like this, I can click on, and it says, if disabled, the display will be only decorative. So it looks like there's umbrellas in here, but as far as the guests are concerned, there's nothing here to interest them. Whereas obviously these, the guests are walking up to them and they're browsing, seeing what they want, that sort of thing, and that's because it's enabled. So the same thing could be done for aviaries. Let me just change the time of day because it's getting a bit dark. That'll do. Let's just pause it as well. So, I suppose at this point you're sort of wondering, okay, so you've explained how gift shops work. What's this got to do with aviaries? Well, simply put, we just replace the guests with beds. It isn't that simple, unfortunately. I think it is something that's doable, and it's something that could please most people that want beds in the game. It would certainly please me. But it isn't just a case of taking that bit of code for the guests and adding it to flying birds. So here's how I think Frontier might do it. So they would take the code that keeps the guests contained within the souvenir shop and the interaction code between the guests and the displays in the souvenir shop, and they would repurpose that for flying birds. But instead of a souvenir shop, it would become an aviary base that could be expanded with 3 types of aviary base. And then we head over into our next section. So this would be your minimum, so it'd still be 3x2. And unlike the souvenir shop, you would be able to choose where the habitat gate, if you like, is. But it would have to be on the outside. You wouldn't be able to put it smack bang in the middle. It would have to snap to sort of the outside. And then your expansion tiles, you would have your 3 choices, which would be square, quarter circle, and triangular. And I know what you're thinking. Oh my god, triangles. We don't have like triangular grid pieces in the game. And that's true. We don't. Not yet. So the Aviary could then be expanded, and it would have 4 options for a base. So there's null, which would, when building, it would maybe show up like this, or like when you're placing the invisible barriers or the invisible paths, it would show up like that. Or you could have gravel, or sand, or wood chip. I think those are your sort of typical Aviary substrate materials. You could choose to have those. Obviously, if you went for null, then you would be able to put your own sort of substrate down for your beds. You might want to just use the terrain paints. You might want a snowy Aviary, for example. This is similar to the walkthrough exhibits with how you can change their base material. Obviously, it's a bit more expanded because it's flying birds and it's not a set footprint. We can make this as big as we want to. But it doesn't just stop with the floor. We would also have modular wall pieces. So we've got mesh and wood. So we've got straight, diagonal, and quarter circle. Imagine that this is wooden mesh, like this, but rounded. And again, but with metal and mesh, straight, diagonal, and quarter circle. So of course, the diagonal would snap along that one or that one, depending how you have your triangles. And you would also have a chain link option as well. So wooden chain link, imagine that that's wooden chain link, and metal and chain link. And then again, you would also have your roof pieces, and they would have different variations as well. There would maybe be more variations than this for the roof actually, but these are just the ones what came to mind when I came up with this theory. So you got your normal flat roof. You got your corner roof, which we have the glass piece for here, but just imagine that that's sort of mesh and wood. You got your diagonal if you want to build a sort of diagonal aviary. You've got a bubble, which is a slightly higher roof than the corner, and it rounds out a little bit nicer. And then you've got your quarter circle flat, another bubble. This one's rounder still. And then you've got your sloped one. So how these would all interact with each other, if I just zoom out a little bit, try and get them all in the same shot, is, so your highlighted grid would appear like it normally does when you're in the construction tab, or the facilities tab for that matter. And this would allow us to build aviaries quite easily. It would still be on the grid. And you could obviously choose your different modular wall pieces, or much like with a gift shop, you can build your own walls. I think that'd be really fun to do as well. Now, obviously, birds don't have much interest in souvenir shops, so the displays and counters would need to have their avian counterparts, which we'll get onto shortly. But essentially, once you've completed your aviary, much like the tiles have to be connected in a souvenir shop, there would need to be at least the base and the roof as far as the aviary is concerned. How the roof would work as null, I don't know. I guess you could probably just select null. Like, it places down as a visible object and then you just change it to null, like you would with the walkthrough exhibit, for example. But the reason why it would have to have a roof is how the bird calculates the space, because the souvenir shop, it just has to work with, where the displays are, where the counter is, and then where the entrance exit is. Whereas with the birds, it would need to measure how much space it's got, sort of front to back, side to side, and vertical space as well. And that's why it'd need a roof. But you could maybe have a null roof and then build your own. I guess that works. It's just sort of seeing where that null roof would be. It's easy to see where a null floor is. It's easy to see where a null wall is. But if you've got null floor, null wall, and null roof, that would get a little bit complicated, I think. But it would have to have a roof, is the point. Because that's how the bird would calculate its navigable area. And then the bird's just sort of free to do what it wants in there, really. It can fly, it can perch, it can feed, it can bathe, it can poo, blah, 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 blah. And that's how I think the aviary construction could work. And we're going to construct an aviary in that fashion in just a second. But replacing the display counters and things like that, we have bird enrichment. So you've got your different perches. So just some examples of different perches. I've pulled some of these off the workshop. Some of them I've built myself. And essentially the birds can interact with these. These would probably be sort of placeable objects, like the displays are. But you could maybe customize it so you'd have like South America themed perch and African themed perch and European themed perch and standard perch, things like that. Same for the feeders. You've got different types of feeders here. So you've got these sort of higher bowl-like feeders. You've got a big low bowl, just got a table, you've got a hanging feeder. These would be for like your hummingbirds and, I don't know, maybe lorikeets. They eat nectar as well. Houses and boxes. Of course, not all flying birds nest in trees and things. Some of them nest on the ground. So we've got ground houses as well. And then baths, different sort of bird baths available. You've got sort of big metal dish, small metal dish, metal tray, stone tray. You could have other variations of this as well, I'd imagine. And then enrichment, so a tree. This could also have perching as well. A sort of aquatic forage pool. That could also be a bath sort of thing. Food forage. These are the sort of things what you usually see like parrots and budgies playing with. Same over here, really. And then like these sorts of trees where, maybe if we had woodpeckers, or you could have like nesting trees, things like that. This is just a scratching tree, but same thing sort of works. And you'd also have a shelter what you could put in. And this would be essentially how the keepers and the vets would interact with the area. So the birds would sort of disappear, if you like, into rabbit holes, like the burrow system for the habitat animals. And we'd be able to view them sort of in little nest boxes in here. Of course, for hornbills, they prefer like logs and hollow tree trunks and things like that, and barrels. But most birds are quite happy with some sort of structure like this, even those sorts of bird boxes. the birds would just interact with these in the same way that the guests sort of interact with them, in that they'd choose something and go to it and then interact with it. So with the guests, it's like pointing at it or they pick it up. With the birds, it would obviously be like they're pecking at the food, they're flying into the nest box, they have a bathing animation, they play with the toys, that sort of thing. More like habitat animals, actually, in that regard, now that I think about it. But essentially, so like guest A might head for the hat stand, whilst guest B heads for the posters. Using this same sort of idea for birds, it would be bird A will go straight for a nest box, while bird B might take a dip in a shallow pool, something like that. As far as path finding is concerned, the birds have a slightly better deal, if you ask me. It is slightly more complicated than the guest AI, but the guests have to work out where they can go in the entire zoo. So the guest AI has to navigate sort of this entire area, whereas the birds, they would just have to navigate the sort of area that you put down for the aviary, if you like. Although they have to navigate a 3D space, it's a much smaller and contained 3D space, but it's still more varied and more, I guess, alive than the walkthrough exhibits are at the moment. Yeah, look at that. I do like the bats, it must be said. So, with that in mind, it isn't as simple as copying the code over, and I've said that a few times this video. It isn't that simple. I wish it was, but it's not. It does require some further work, and of course we also need the models and the textures and the animations for the flying birds. But it's getting there. You know, the swan has the new feather technology, and when it jumps over something, it does sort of fly. It's not a sustained flight, but it does sort of fly. But the coding for the birds needs to be at a point where it can have sort of the souvenir shop AI mechanics added to it. But the guest pathfinding is also not without its flaws. As you'll have seen, even when contained to a specific environment, the guests sometimes do still struggle to move around efficiently. Sometimes they'll walk behind the shop counters unless you block it off. They congest near the entrance due to the amount of guests wanting to get in and out. But that's sort of impacted by the fact you can only have a 4-meter path connection to the entrance. Obviously that wouldn't be such an issue with birds. It would just be the number of birds or the size of the bird that would affect how you sort of go about it. Birds could still be a way off, but I do think we're closer now than we have ever been before in the history of Planet Zoo. We've got butterflies, we've got 2 species of bats, we've got the walkthrough exhibits, we've got the new feathering technology, we've got the swan that sort of flies, and we've got the gameplay mechanic in form of the souvenir shop that, for me, would work really well for an aviary to contain flying birds. It does provide a nice balance between the freedom of creating your own aviary, but also the ease of use that the walkthrough exhibits and the souvenir shops have. I hope I've explained and demonstrated this theory enough for you to be able to get on board with how it could work. But just in case I haven't, we are going to throw up a quick aviary in the style of this. So we have our minimum. So that's the smallest an aviary can be. But we're now gonna go ahead and get our habitat gate, or our aviary gate as it's going to be called, or whatever. And oops, we're gonna just pop it down like so. Let me get rid of this long grass. Make things a bit easy for us. So that's the minimum it can be. I'm gonna make it bigger. So we're gonna go this way. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Just do something like this. You know, just throwing something together quickly. Because we can. And then let's just go for the wooden mesh. So this would obviously snap on where this snaps flat. That would snap vertically. So unless you was building your own wall via a null option, this obviously wouldn't be available. This advanced move wouldn't be available, rather, because it would just snap at a set height. And then the last one, sort of smoosh that in. It's not quite straight, but we'll live. Obviously it wouldn't be like that. And then we'll do the same for the back wall. Yep. And then I just want to take these and slide these along here. Again, obviously these would snap technically. Oh, I've hit the wrong button. Let's try that again. It's not the neatest thing in the world, but it's just to demonstrate the point. And then these would snap. Onto the edge. And I want a bit of a taller aviary, so let's just duplicate everything up by 1. It's a nice tall aviary. You could maybe also get a 2-piece for the top. And then we go ahead and pop a roof on. Obviously the Frontier system would be far more refined than this. I'm just throwing this together very quickly just to sort of demonstrate how it would work. But, you know, these would all snap to the grid. And they'd probably be more lined up. I'd hope they'd be more lined up anyway. And then we just want to copy these over. And then you would obviously click on the gate and it'd say like calculate space, something like that, and then it'd say contained. And then if you wanted to, you could set these to null, but we're not going to. What I am going to do though is I would like a sandy base. He says, let's, where are we? Let's pop this in like so. So this would obviously, again, be much simpler. You just select it and it changed the texture. So we've got our sandy basin, and then I would select do something like that. Obviously this would disappear because it'd be like so. Because it's no longer null, so they'd disappear. Then you've got your sandy basin. And then what we could then do is, let's put a shelter in. We're gonna have some sheltering beds. It'd be sort of nice if these would snap on to the outsides of habitats as well. Aviaries, rather, not just habitats. I don't know, let's just say we've got that there. And then we want to pop some perches in. Let's go for this one. We can hang it from the roof. As an example. And what else should we choose? Just these branches, which are actually aquatic for rock tree things. So these would, much like the displays and things, these would be free to place within the area as you so please. And then let's get a feeder in. Pop a feeder there. Let's get a little house in. It's not going to be for jackass penguins. That's something else, how the aviaries would work. You could have mixed species. I think that's something we would definitely need for the aviary system. So let's put a little water dish sort of up front and centre. And what else can we put in? Let's pop a tree in. A little enrichment tree. And let's do that over at this side. Make sure it doesn't get too close to the roof. What else can we put in? No, let's put one of these perches in. And then of course you'd also be able to add plants. So let's just go for desert because we can. Let's turn our blueprints off. Now it might be that the birds don't interact with these plants, or it might be that with certain plants there is bird interaction available. That'd be quite nice if that was the case. I know there's a lot of the DLC sort of plants that don't have sort of climbing values added onto them, so maybe they could have perching values added onto them instead, something along those lines. They need something a bit taller, so maybe we'd put a perchable tree there, or a perchable cacti. Maybe it's for like burrowing owls and a desert species of bird. And a perchable tree. Sure, that works. And then you would be able to end up with something like this. This is just thrown together really quickly. It would be much quicker, probably, when obviously Frontier get their hands on it and make the process much more streamlined. I'll just copy some of the background in for you so that it's a little bit easier to see. so you don't have all the pieces showing. But yeah, it would be much more streamlined, much more polished and easier to use if and when Frontier get round to doing this. But yeah, just I can imagine like little burrowing owls on the floor, and maybe a species of bird. It might not even have to be a desert bird. You could maybe do lorikeets or budgies, just sort of fluttering around. There would obviously be a limit with how many animals a space could contain, much like with the walkthrough exhibits. Part of that would be dependent on the AI of the bird. The smaller the bird, I'd imagine the smaller the hitbox, and therefore the more you could have. The bigger the bird, I reckon something this size, maybe 2 hornbills, something like that. But yeah, I really like the theory that I came up with. I hope you like it too. I hope I have done a good enough job of demonstrating to you how this could work using the souvenir shop technique that was introduced in update 1.16. Either way, if you have any questions, please ask them in the comments and I will answer as best as possible. If you have liked this video, give it a thumbs up. It really helps me out, helps the channel grow. That can only be a good thing. You can also find me on Instagram at JW_YT. Until the next time, my friends, you can take your tinfoil hats off now. Thank you very much for watching. Stay safe, stay kind, and I shall see you all in that next video, whenever that may be. Bye-bye for now.